Good morning, everyone. So nice to see you. My name is Matt Gawalb. I'm the Senior Associate Dean at New York Law School. We're so pleased to welcome you and so excited for this briefing with the presumptive speaker of the New York City Council, Councilmember Julie Menin. Yeah, nice to see you. For 134 years, as New York's law school, NYLS has embraced its responsibility to engage deeply on the legal and policy issues that shape this city and to serve as a resource and partner to government at every level. That commitment is reflected in our graduates, fully 1/3 of whom enter public service or public interest careers, many right here in the city and state. It's reflected in our alumni and students, a group that includes several current council members. They continue a long legacy of NYLS alumni serving on the council and its staff. Today's program is presented in partnership with one of New York's most vital civic institutions, the Citizens Budget Commission. We're very grateful to CBC Executive Director, Andrew Rein. Where's Andrew? Okay. Who will co-moderate today's conversation with our own Ben Max, who is Executive Editor and Program Director of the Center for New York City and State Law. Thank you both so much for organizing the event, which is our second collaboration following a really wonderful co-hosted comptroller debate earlier this year. This program is especially meaningful to me personally. Before joining the law school, I served as legislative director for the council under Speaker Mark Viverito and previously under Speaker Christine Quinn. I saw Speaker Johnson is here as well, which is a special treat for us. So the council is an institution I love, knowing firsthand how profoundly its work influences the daily lives of New Yorkers. So now, with a new mayor, comptroller, and speaker taking office, this is a particularly important moment to hear Councilmember Menin's vision. She is uniquely prepared for this moment. Her decades of public service across economic development, consumer protection, culture, small business recovery, and much more position her to lead the council with strength and creativity. She's also a good friend and a valued partner to NYLS. Just last week, she succeeded in passing legislation establishing a New York City Census and Organizing Office. Earlier this year, she joined us here on campus to launch 2030 census organizing efforts at a conference hosted by our New York Elections, Census, and Redistricting Institute, which is led by Professor Jeff Weiss, who is here. So we look forward to deepening this partnership, in particular as the 2030 count approaches. This legislation is just one example of the essential role the council and soon Speaker Menin plays in shaping and safeguarding New York's future. NYLS is very proud to support this work, and we remain committed to partnering with government and civic institutions at this pivotal time. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our colleague and friend, Marissa Shorenstein, Chair of the Citizens Budget Commission. Marissa serves as Chief External Affairs Officer at BSE Global, which owns the New York Liberty, Brooklyn Nets, and Barclays Center. She previously held senior leadership roles at SKDK and AT&T, served as Director of Governor Hochul's transition team, and as Press Secretary and Deputy Communications Director for Governor David Paterson. Please join me in welcoming Marissa.
Thank you, Matt, for that kind introduction and for welcoming us here today. We're delighted to be back at New York Law School for another important conversation with the next Speaker of the City Council, Julie Menin. I'm going to take out that presumptive because I think you got it in the bag. First, a bit about the CBC. We are a nonpartisan civic organization rooted in deep research about the fiscal health of our city and state. Since our founding in 1932, we have worked with the city and state across every administration and through every financial crisis to provide sound, fiscally prudent, and constructive ideas to ensure the city and state remain healthy and prosperous. Which brings us to our guest today. Matt already has told you a lot about her, but the CBC has worked with Councilmember Julie Menin in many capacities over her prolific career. Julie currently represents District 5 on the east side of Manhattan and Roosevelt Island. She's chair of the Committee on Consumer and Worker Protection and co-chair of the Women's Caucus. I first got to know Julie when she served as Commissioner of Media and Entertainment for New York City. I'm going to go on a limb and say that was your most fun role, but a role in which she served as chief promoter for our creative sectors with great success. Since then, she has served as Commissioner of the Department of Consumer Affairs and as New York City's Census Director, a critical role advocating against the Trump administration's efforts to add a citizenship question and achieving a historic result by finishing first among all cities. Julie is an attorney, former small business owner, and all-around great New Yorker. Here today to interview her are Ben Max, Executive Editor and Program Director for the Center for New York City Law, and my friend and partner in crime, Andrew Rein, President of the Citizens Budget Commission. Welcome to all three of you.
And we're sponsoring this, co-sponsoring this again, not just because we're cheap and we bought the banner once and we need to reuse it, but this is an important event. Take it away, Ben.
Yeah, it's now half the cost it was the first time.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you all for being here, and those watching the live stream and those watching or listening at a later date. This is a great turnout and, of course, an event with great interest. I'm Ben Max. This is Andrew Rein. You've heard about us already, so I won't introduce us any further, and I won't give any more of your bio because people have done that already, so that's great. And we'll get into some more of your experience here. We did call this presumptive next speaker because it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
How foolish could we possibly look here? Are we at any risk here of looking silly for having had this event? How locked up is this speaker race?
Well, first of all, Ben, Andrew, New York Law School, Citizens Budget Commission, thank you to all of you for being here. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this dialogue. We were thrilled to be able to announce a supermajority of support the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and we really did that because it was based on the members. The members asked me to announce. We had built a very diverse, broad-based coalition of support that we had honestly had for several months, and so by announcing it early, it allowed all of us to start to begin that work of the transition. So I'm thrilled to announce we now have actually 38 members in our coalition, and it continues to grow. And it's just a very exciting time, as well as a very important obligation for what we need to do in the next 4 years.
The city council speaker race, I think most people in this room know, is determined by the members. The public doesn't get a vote. Nobody gets a vote but those 51 city council members. So you need 25 plus yourself to win. There's a little bit of an outside game to it with labor unions and county leaders and so forth, but it's very much in a legislative leader position where you're convincing your colleagues. So I think I know a little bit of this already, but for the folks in the room, can you give people a little insight into what your pitch to your colleagues was? What was the sort of 2 or 3 minute pitch when you initially were meeting with colleagues over the course of the last years as to why you should lead the council?
Absolutely. And first, let me take a moment to thank a former speaker who was here, a longtime friend, Corey Johnson. The speaker's race is an anomaly. Yes, Corey. The speaker's race is a real anomaly in city government because oftentimes over the course of the last year, New Yorkers either in my district or in other districts would say, well, how can we help? We want to get involved. But it is an insular process in that it is obviously only your colleagues that support you. We have all worked together for the last 4 years, so we know each other very, very well. My pitch was that I've run 3 city agencies as commissioner. I've been a lawyer for over 20 years, a former small business owner. Being speaker is a management job. It is managing a very large and critical and diverse institution. So that was really my pitch to the members, that at this critical time when we're facing draconian cuts from the federal government, when we're facing ICE raids, when we're facing a tremendous amount of uncertainty, to really have a steady hand at the ship, but also one that is going to come in with a very bold vision, which I definitely, want to talk about.
We'll get to it.
I do want to talk a little bit. You mentioned labor unions, county leaders. This is a very member-driven process. So I was thrilled to have the support of the 5 county leaders. They told me never agreed on a speaker candidate before. There was division before. So all 5 actually did agree in this case, which was wonderful. But that is member-driven. The members go to the county leaders and say, this is the council member that we want to support. Certainly with labor, I've worked with labor for many, many years as a former commissioner of consumer affairs. I presided over that agency when we morphed it into consumer and worker protection. Because we cannot have a city Department of Labor, we would be preempted. And I used to teach preemption at Columbia. We cannot have a city Department of Labor, but what we can have and what we did do, and I was a commissioner, when we did this, we morphed the Department of Consumer Affairs to then cover some key and vital worker protection issues, such as the launch of the paid sick leave law and other laws that we've been able to put under the purview of the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. So I think, to answer your question, Speaker's race is one of these odd situations in that, yes, everyone is interested in it, but it is obviously only the members that vote. I'm really humbled and gratified by the support of my colleagues and really looking forward to the next 4 years working very closely with them.
Two pieces of a follow-up to that. Your coalition included a lot of, they're mostly returning members, but a lot of the new members who are coming in. Was there anything specific you said to those folks to get their support in terms of how you'll lead the council for the newest members? And the second part is a lot of the members in your initial coalition represent districts that in the mayoral election were not supportive of Mayor-elect Mamdani. How much was your pitch to those members being a check on the new mayor?
Sure. So first of all, with the new members, I'm gratified that every new member supported me for speaker. And I think that is a testament to the coalition that we were able to build and the type of leadership that they want to see moving forward over the next 4 years. We have a phenomenal new class of council members that are coming in. If you don't know them, I encourage you to get to know them right away because they have tremendous experience that they're bringing to bear in the council. In terms of your second question, I would push back on that quite some because we have a broad ideological spectrum within the city council. We have Republicans, we have conservative Democrats, we have moderate Democrats, we have center-left Democrats, we've got progressives, we have DSA members. We really cover the whole ideological spectrum, and it is a job of the speaker to build consensus to move the agenda forward. Many members who supported me, and I can list, many of them, certainly Councilmember Shekhar Krishnan, Councilmember Eric Botcher, Councilmember Sean Abreu, just to mention a few, are in districts that absolutely went for the mayor-elect and very, very strongly, and many other districts as well. I'm only giving you a few of many examples. So again, there were many districts and council members that are in our coalition that absolutely went very strongly for the mayor-elect. Councilmember Chris Marte, many, many, many members. So what I think is exciting now is that this is a time to come together. This is a time for us to be able to show the city council functioning at the highest level. We definitely have a shared affordability agenda with the mayor-elect. I mean, look, we've been working on childcare for the last 3.5 years. The council passed a universal childcare package almost 3 years ago. I had 5 bills in the package. One of the key bills was a bill to mandate universal childcare in New York City and give the mayor 5 years to implement it. And that was my bill. Those bills were largely not implemented. So there's broad-based agreement that we must do universal childcare. There is broad-based agreement on affordable housing. And one of the things, and this is also a pitch that I had to members, is I think the council has been far too reactive and not proactive enough. At the end of the day, if you look at the council, we react on land use. So a ULURP comes to us, we react, we negotiate, a result happens, and that is, in my opinion, reactive and not proactive. I would like the council to be far more proactive. City of Yes is another example. City of Yes, we responded to, we made changes. That is reactive. That is not being proactive. I want us to be proactive on building affordable housing. I'm happy to expound on that because I have a lot of thoughts on how we can build more affordable housing. And I'm really excited for the council to roll up our sleeves and be a key partner in driving that agenda.
You mentioned your bills passed 3 years ago to put the city towards a path to universal childcare haven't been implemented by the mayor. Should the council have not somehow insisted on implementation there? Would you do something different if you were leading the council over this time to make sure that things like that are implemented?
Absolutely. There's a new division within the council that is focused on compliance. It has several staffers. The issue is, if the administration is not implementing the council's laws, we need to do something about it. I mean, what happened on universal childcare, and again, I had 5 of the bills in the universal childcare package. The main bill that I had would have created this advisory board that required the city of New York to enact universal childcare within 5 years. To be clear, we didn't specify, did that need to be 0 to 5, 0 to 2? We left some flexibility based on the budget, but it did mandate universal childcare within 5 years. That advisory board, we had to hammer the administration to even meet. They didn't meet the deadline in meeting. They did not really enact universal childcare at all. And I had other bills in that package that would have provided grants to struggling childcare providers. We've had about 1,400 childcare providers close in recent years. So we do need to look at that, because it's not, if we're going to really implement universal childcare, we have to look at the supply side as well and figure out how we're doing that. Another bill that I had is the state has a tax abatement for property owners that build childcare facilities on site. So that's something, of course, we should be availing ourselves of that. That bill also wasn't implemented. So it was eminently frustrating to see that level of dysfunction. And that is something that we definitely have to change. And I'm optimistic we will be able to change.
So you laid out a great agenda for the rest of our conversation. You talked about management, federal cuts, land use, childcare. Let's start to unpack a little more of that. And the management of the council, let's start with the management of the council and the budget. You were not surprised that I would raise. Over time, council's played an increasingly substantive role in the city budget. I've been doing this for a long time, and it's more and more active. And there's no shortage of priorities, as you've outlined some, yours, the council members, your colleagues, the incoming administration, the mayor-elect, who's outlined a number of programs. And of course, there are fiscal challenges. You mentioned the federal government, the city budget gaps as well. What will be your approach, and how do you manage the council when there are so many different priorities, not all of which can be adopted in the budget?
Well, it's a great question. First of all, for the last 4 years, and to be clear, I was not on the budget negotiating team in the last 4 years. The last 4 years, we have largely done a restorative budget. And a restorative budget means we are fighting the mayor to restore the budget cuts. And that is basically what we did. To me, that is a baseline of what we should do. Of course, we should restore the budget cuts, but we have to go far beyond that and really come up with a bold, aggressive vision of what we as a council stand for, what are our big ideas that we want to implement. So that is how I believe the next iteration of the council should be focused on. It's not enough to just restore the budget cuts. It's not enough to just restore the funding to cultural organizations, to libraries, to schools. All of that is the bare minimum of what needs to happen, and then we need to move beyond that. So I'll give an example, because I think it's so frustrating when you hear elected officials talk in big terms, but then they don't give examples. So I was very proud of the fact that when I served as commissioner of the Department of Consumer Affairs, I launched a project called NYC Kids Rise. NYC Kids Rise is a universal college savings program. We launched it almost a decade ago. We tested it in Queens in School District 30 with 10,000 kids. And the premise behind it was that if you give a low-income child a college savings account, they are 3 times more likely to go to college, and once they're in college, 4 times more likely to graduate. So we launched this project with the 10,000 kids in Queens District 30. It is now a universal program. We've done 282,000 of these college savings accounts. They're worth $50 million. And we set up a program where they're invested in the state's 529. So we seed each child with $100. It's invested in the 529. Upon graduation, it could possibly be worth thousands of dollars, because families can contribute $5, $10. Businesses can adopt a school. PTAs can adopt the school. So we've created this whole model of wealth building within communities. And I'm incredibly proud of that program. We also cover undocumented children as well, which the 529 does not do, but we figured out a legal mechanism to do that. I mention that as one of many examples of projects that, in my opinion, are incredibly important. Baby bonds is another one. The new research shows that baby bonds, if you invest, the right number is really $3,000, not what the Trump administration is doing. The data really shows that if you invest $3,000 in a baby bond and that money grows over time, that is one of the singular best ways to address income inequality in the city of New York. So I mention these as a couple examples of larger scale, big idea projects that we as a council can do. The third example that I will give is skyrocketing healthcare costs. I'm a former regulatory attorney. It's something I'm very passionate about is healthcare law. I've spent a lot of time working on it. 2 years ago, the council passed my bill to create the nation's first Office of Healthcare Accountability. That office is now up and running at the Department of Health. It has staffed by 15 staff members. And the main meat of what that office is charged with is to lower New Yorkers' healthcare costs. That office now publishes the list of every medical procedure at every New York City hospital. So Andrew, I know you and I have talked about it because I was very excited when the bill passed and I called you to talk to you about it, because to me, this is what the future is really about. New York City is the second largest purchaser of healthcare in all of New York State. New York State government is number one, New York City government is number two purchaser. We are not harnessing our purchasing power because obviously we pay for the health care of our city workers, we pay for the health care for the retirees, for dependents, and that overall nut is close to $11 billion a year, or approximately 10% of the New York City budget. It's estimated that this new office that we've created is going to save the city $2 billion a year. Why? Because we will finally know what the hospitals are charging, and we will, if we do this right, harness our purchasing power to drive costs down. So that, to me, is a very exciting area because that's an area of cost savings. And I think it's incumbent upon the council to find areas of savings so that then we can be a key partner in doing important issues like universal childcare and other projects that we definitely want to do.
So again, telegraphing my next question, I so appreciate it. So you've talked about being proactive and having a proactive agenda. And one of the challenges in every administration is there are priorities and they're additive, and no one's kind of willing to say, well, what are the things that don't really improve the lives of New Yorkers or someone else's priorities that may no longer be there. So revenues are going to be stronger. The Council Finance put out an estimate. I wouldn't bank every one of those dollars, but they say $3 billion over 2 years. Spending might be lower because that's been a practice of this administration, but still we have budget gaps because City FEPS is underfunded next year by $800 million. Shelter is underfunded by $400 million. General assistance, we can go through the list, $4 billion of underfunding. So there will be a budget gap. We have to be prepared and responding to federal government, and there are all these priorities. Talk more, if you would, about the council's role in fiscal responsibility as you identified the Health Accountability Office. What should the council be doing to identify savings and programs that we should actually shrink or cut so that we can afford new priorities?
We're a fiscal steward, and we need to be a key partner in savings. And that means going through every single agency budget and really looking at it and seeing what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. The council gives out a tremendous amount of money in discretionary funds. I believe we really need to look at the data metrics. Are our taxpayer dollars going to programs that are really moving the needle for New Yorkers? You must have data metrics to support that. And so that is what we need to do. And that is what we will have the finance division do. And that is something I'm deeply committed to. So for example, when I served as the census director, and we were under tremendous pressure on the census, because not only were we the epicenter, of course, of COVID at the exact time that the census was launching, but we also were given a very little runway to launch our efforts on the census. And we had the scepter of the citizenship question on the census, even though we sued. And I was one of the lawyers at the law department who worked on the case, along with our great New York Attorney General. We won that case at the US Supreme Court. But until we knew we won the case, we were under a real threat of that as well. So I mentioned the census because there I was deeply committed to funding organizations that traditionally had never received city funding. Just because an organization has for years and years received city funding, and I know this is an incendiary thing to say, does not necessarily mean that we should continue funding the organization. We need to take a hard look at every organization, look at the data metrics, and make sure the data metrics support it. We also should be using clawbacks. If an organization is not performing the work that they are supposed to be doing, the council should be clawing that funding back. I did that on the census. We had very tight clawback provisions, and we had staggered payments so that we're not paying all at once, we're paying over time, making sure the organization is meeting the metrics that we are set out for them.
I've been doing this long enough that a signal goes off for me when you say that, as that's something easy to say right before you become speaker and very hard to do once you are speaker. And you have to say to the council members who in their districts have been funding these organizations for years, we're actually, that it's not effective. You're ready to have those conversations?
We have to have those conversations because we want to do the most work we can with the dollars that we have. It is our responsibility as fiscal stewards. We want to make sure that we are funding organizations that are doing the most vital work in communities all across the city. It's exactly what we did on the census. We funded 150 organizations who were the trusted community voice on the ground. We had very stringent data metrics to make sure that they were meeting those goals. And as long as they were meeting those goals, then we continued to fund them. So we do need to do that. And we need to open up the process to city funding because it's so difficult oftentimes for new organizations to receive city funding, and it really shouldn't be that way.
And so, first of all, I'd love to work together on performance management. You talked about having the right data and the right process so we can figure out what works and not. So we'll follow up on that. Another one, because I appreciate your caution that we should always be specific because we can talk in platitudes all day long and nothing happens. Thank you, Ben, for mentioning that. Enrollment in the New York City public schools has shrunk dramatically, yet we hold schools harmless so they can have the same number of teachers and all infrastructure, even though some schools are significantly have fewer students. Is that the kind of thing that should be a target so we could take those hundreds of millions and reallocate them?
That we have to have a discussion within the council on that. We've had the discussion in the past. I want to have that discussion moving forward. We will obviously be naming committee chairs. So we'll be naming all the committee chairs in mid-January. I'm not going to get ahead of that on that issue because that's a conversation.
So let's turn to another easy one with land use.
I'm sorry?
Let's turn to another easy one and talk about the council's role in land use. First of all, it's a pleasure to have a substantive conversation on these things. We have a housing shortage, we have an affordability crisis, and everybody from the mayor-elect to the current council to Rebney, I see Jim here, to Rebney has some version of an adoption of the all of the above approach. We need a lot of different types of housing all over the city. We've seen the passage of the City of Yes, multiple neighborhoods rezoning, city charter amendments that are in the land use process designed to increase the development of housing. How, Speaker, will you lead your colleagues to ensure the council's land use decisions supercharge housing production as much as the city really needs?
Well, this is why I think we need a proactive plan. So I've been talking about this for the last couple months, like specifically, is that we're too reactive by just reacting to ULURPs. We have to go well beyond that. So I want the council to put out a proactive, affordable housing plan that looks at a number of different things. We own over 1,000 sites, DCAS does, some of which are vacant land. Some of them are completely unutilized buildings. Some are underutilized buildings. We need to look at all of them and really see which sites would be suitable to build affordable housing. We have 215 public library branches. Some, although not all, some are suitable to build affordable housing. So we're already starting to look at that, gathering the data, starting to look at that. So we can see that is another way to do a proactive affordable housing plan. We need to look at every single district across the city of New York. One example that I've been giving is Governor's Island. I used to serve on the board of Governor's Island. Governor's Island has a residential deed restriction that the federal government put on that prohibits any housing whatsoever. We need to go to the federal government and get that deed restriction lifted and build affordable housing on Governor's Island. It's a phenomenal opportunity to really make Governor's Island the future of what it could be. It's not only about Governor's Island. We should be doing that in pockets all throughout New York City. So that's something that I'm very excited about. It's not something the council has traditionally done. And so I want to hit the ground running on that.
So the voters of New York adopted some changes to the city charter. We'll see some projects fast-tracked, a new appeals board with the speaker, mayor, relevant borough presidents that can approve land use proposals even if the council has rejected them. You got support in the speaker's race from some of those members who represent districts that have been very slow in production.
Right.
How do you see the process and decisions playing out? Will we see more proposals being made because there's a chance of success? Will we see more proposals brought to a vote? And will there be more pressure on those districts that have not been producing housing?
We are going to have a very aggressive approach on building affordable housing in this council. We are committed to it. And while I understand some members have not wanted in certain areas housing, we need to be thinking outside of the box. And we need to really look within districts to find sites that are suitable. So I look forward to working with my colleagues on that so that they can look at their districts and see what are the most suitable sites. I mentioned the DCAS sites, I mentioned libraries as two prime targets of where we really need to be digging deep and looking to see can we build affordable housing on those sites?
And we would add to that, and the mayor-elect has talked about parking lots and NYCHA facilities. There's a lot of possibility for infill development. You've said, as many people do, talking about affordable housing, we have an affordability crisis and we need to address that. But we also know that mixed income housing can cross-subsidize the rents and leverage city dollars more. We know in NYCHA properties, we can throw off money to help redevelop NYCHA properties such as, and then we know at some places in NYCHA, we should probably more cost effectively tear down and rebuild. When people say affordable housing, sometimes it comes to a dead end because it doesn't pencil. What do you think about mixed income housing, NYCHA properties, these types of issues?
We have to build, obviously, all types of housing because in order to truly build affordable housing, that requires building other types of housing as well. So we know that from a sheer economic standpoint. And I think there's real support within the council. With that said, we obviously want to make sure we're building as much affordable housing as possible because we have an affordability crisis. I mean, that is issue number one across the board. And so that has got to be our top priority. But obviously, in order to do it, you have to build other types of housing as well.
Given the charter changes and the increased power to the speaker, the mayor, and the borough presidents on land use, it sounds like the answer already you're giving is yes, but just to be clear on that process, do you envision as speaker being much more involved in a lot of land use proposals earlier on so it doesn't necessarily get to the appeals board, but you're helping negotiate those deals?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I chaired Community Board 1 in Lower Manhattan for 7 years in the years after 9/11, where I think at one point we had 90 active construction projects at one time. So we were really redeveloping all of Lower Manhattan. At the time, it was challenging, but I think we now see, the work that work really come to bear. Absolutely, I plan on getting involved earlier. One of the things that I've talked about for many years is I think ULURP is a dysfunctional and broken system. If you look at other cities, they truly have comprehensive planning. So what ULURP is a negotiated settlement each and every time with a different result each and every time. Sometimes a community center is built, sometimes a park is built, sometimes a school is built, sometimes the height is changed. You've got wildly different results happening each and every time as a result of the ULURP process. If you look at other cities across the country, they require developers to build or put into a school fund to build new school seats so that we're not causing overcrowded schools in certain areas. They require transit infrastructure upgrades so that is being thoughtfully addressed. We don't have that in New York. And it's really shocking to think that for all these years, we have let a broken and dysfunctional system endure with no one really trying to tackle it. I do plan on getting involved earlier. I think it's working closely with that particular colleague on the ULURP. It's making sure we have the proper planners in our Department of Planning who are going to be proactively working with that council member. And so and then also that we're doing holistic and comprehensive planning, looking at all these issues that ultimately affect that district moving forward.
So when I hear you talk about being proactive and in effect having, and you haven't used these words, more as of right development because we have the ground rules set, could we look forward to the next version of a City of Yes coming out of the council for something citywide?
I think we need comprehensive planning in the city of New York. So I look forward to working with my colleagues, working with our land use division to see what can we do that would be more comprehensive as opposed to these piecemeal approaches that don't really look collectively at communities on a larger scale and don't really look at what truly are the needs of New York moving forward.
You're giving me some flashbacks here, speaking of Speaker Johnson in the audience here, because, and you can correct me if I'm...
He switched seats. I don't know what that means.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's the...
I think he was hiding.
He can correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the ways that COVID disrupted things, if I remember correctly, was right before COVID hit, the council was working on a major housing plan.
Yeah.
There was consideration of comprehensive planning legislation. A lot of that kind of got derailed. So there might be some old documents at the city council that you guys can collaborate on. A lot of speakers have certain areas that they're most passionate about, certain policy areas. Obviously, you've already talked about childcare and affordable housing. Will there be another top policy agenda area?
Yes.
We've obviously seen speakers
Yes.
pass with those. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
preview that for us.
To me, it's healthcare. You know, healthcare is one of the most important issues for New Yorkers. Medical debt is a leading cause of debt for New Yorkers. But healthcare, there's not a single person in this room, there's not a single person in New York City that unfortunately at one point or another, either themselves or a loved one goes through a major health crisis or emergency. And so that is why I have spent a tremendous amount of time. And when I started my career as a regulatory attorney, I specialized in healthcare law. And that was the type of law that I'm personally extremely interested in. So I think there is much more that we can do on the healthcare front. The first tranche was obviously this healthcare accountability office that we've created. The second tranche has got to be, how do we lower the skyrocketing healthcare costs for New Yorkers? And to me, if you really want to focus on an affordability agenda, that has to be a critical piece of it. Another issue is insurance. The insurance costs that we pay in New York City are completely out of whack with other states. Car insurance, we have some of the highest in the nation. Insurance to build housing. So when we want to build more affordable housing, the insurance costs are through the roof. We need to address that. I want to address that. Just like we did on hospital pricing. So basically, when I did the healthcare accountability bill, there were some who said, well, you can't do the healthcare accountability bill because it is preempted by the state, because only the state regulates hospitals. Well, that is true, but as I mentioned, I did teach preemption at Columbia. That was one of my classes that I taught. There was always a path, and the path is by regulating transparency, by putting sunlight, which is always the best disinfectant, by putting sunlight onto the topic of hospital prices. That is what allows us to lower prices. We need to do the same for insurance. It is outrageous, the insurance costs that New Yorkers are paying. And so we have to lower those costs across the board. And one way that we legislatively will have power to do so as a council is to look at pricing. We don't have the ability to regulate insurance companies. Only the state can, and the DFS is the agency that does that. But we do have the legal authority to put sunlight on it and to look at the pricing, just like we did with hospitals. So that is an area that I very much want the council to tackle moving forward.
And when you've talked about reinvigorating the council's use of subpoena power, is that exactly what you have in mind, or do you have other things in mind?
So the subpoena power, the council has not often, and I see Jorge nodding his head, has not often used the subpoena power. Certainly in the last 4 years, it was not used at all. So I put out an idea several weeks ago. It's something I've been thinking a lot about. In reading the city charter and in reading our city council rules, legally, we, the city council, have the power to issue subpoenas to entities, and I mean corporations, for example, that are not following our laws. I'll give an example. Starbucks. So I am chair of Consumer and Worker Protection in the City Council. A year and a half ago, I held a hearing on Starbucks. And during that hearing, I was questioning DCWP. And I said, how many stores have violations of either the paid sick leave law or the Fair Workweek law? They told me 76. So at that time, 76 Starbucks locations were violating two of our critical laws. So my response to that is, if they're ever called for a company-wide investigation, it is Starbucks. Why? Because you can't just investigate one store at a time when you have the proliferation of that many stores violating our laws. You need to be able to figure out if there's a pattern and practice. And so that is why I demanded a company-wide investigation, which DCWP did, and they recently announced a settlement. That is a perfect example of where a subpoena from the City Council would have been warranted, would have been value added, so we can see, is there a pattern and practice of violating the council's laws?
Let me come back to childcare for a moment. You talked a bit about it earlier, so two quick things on that. One is, you said in your legislation you had not decided what universal meant. Mayor-elect Mamdani has said universal is free for all children 6 weeks and older, free universal 6 weeks and older. He said he, of course, understands there will be a ramp-up process to that. You're not going to do that overnight. Generally speaking, what does universal mean to you in this space? Because right now, as you know, we have a patchwork of voucher system, contracted childcare.
Right.
There's a whole thing that could potentially be enhanced as it is, changed, made totally free, as the mayor-elect has talked about. What's the general gist of how you think about universal?
When we did the childcare package, when we passed my 5 bills, I did say I do believe we should be providing childcare 0 to 5. The bill that I mentioned was not proscriptive in that regard, because we did want to allow some flexibility for the administration to look at the costs involved with that. 0 to 2, there is very little for parents currently right now who are 0 to 2. If we were to do a universal childcare for 0 to 2, the approximate cost of that would be $1.3 billion. I do believe we need to look at 0 to 5, 0 to 6, so I agree with that. We also need to look at after school, because for working parents who are in 3K and pre-K, their workday is not ending at 3:30, 2:30. It just isn't. And so we have to also look at that piece of the equation as well, to look at providing some type of extended day option for working parents who need that. I will say it's not only normatively the right thing to do for us to look at universal childcare, it's fiscally the right thing to do as well, because approximately 375,000 parents, mainly who were women, left the workforce last year because they could not find affordable and accessible childcare. That costs the city approximately $2.2 billion in lost economic output, because those parents simply left the New York City workforce. So there's a cost to not doing childcare. So we need to really look at that cost and see, where can we find the money to be able to do this. I am confident we can find the money to do universal childcare. And what ages would that be? Well, that's a discussion that I look forward to having with the mayor-elect. Yes, we need to do something for 0 to 5, 0 to 6. I couldn't agree more. That's why I passed 5 bills that would have done that simply weren't implemented. So I absolutely agree with that.
You really only have to worry about 0 to 3 at this point,
Right.
thanks to pre-K.
Exactly. Because we have 3K and pre-K, for those children, I do think we need to look at some type of extended day for working parents, so that we can, what does that look like? We need to look at that. I also think, by the way, we can look at enrichment opportunities as well. We're spending more per pupil on educating our students in the city of New York than almost any other municipality across the country, yet our reading and math scores are incredibly low. How do we fix that? Enrichment is one way. So if we're going to do something on extended day, there also should, in my opinion, be an enrichment component as well, which would have the added benefit of focusing on those reading and math scores.
And I appreciate that you harken back to we should be able to find the money to do this. And there have been estimates on universal childcare up to $5 billion, on free buses of,
Right.
$1 billion. If we were to fully fund the council's expansion of FEPS, it might be $5 billion a year. If we're to do debt service on borrowing, $70 billion for housing, we have another $4 billion a year. It starts to add up. And the mayor-elect has proposed to increase the personal income tax top rate, which is already the highest in the country, but increase that for the city, and the business tax rate. Where do you stand on increasing taxes to fund these programs?
Look, I mean, that is an issue for Albany. That is not an issue, obviously, that the city council has a lot to say on. I would like our role to be to find savings in our city budget. That is where we can be most value added. And I mentioned areas that we could save on healthcare. We can approximately save $2 billion a year. No bid contracts is another huge area of savings. So currently, we saw this with the asylum seeker crisis. Mayor Eric Adams, the asylum seeker crisis was costing the city approximately $4 billion a year. But he engaged in no bid contracts. It's not only about Mayor Eric Adams in the de Blasio administration. It was the same thing. The no bid contracts was extended over 100 times to the tune of $7 billion. I have a bill that I introduced about a year ago, did not get a hearing, that would eradicate the use of no bid contracts beyond 30 days. This to me is so important. We cannot allow, emergency is an emergency. A no bid contract should be used for an emergency. Emergency should be limited to 30 days unless there are extenuating circumstances, which I outline in the bill. You can't use no bid contracts for years on end, which is what has happened in the last few administrations. Anyone, I used to be a small business owner, no one in their right mind would say, I'm just going to take the highest bid and I'm not going to competitively bid. And as a commissioner, we are required to competitively bid. And if we don't take the lowest bid, we are compelled to write a very lengthy memo outlining all the reasons why we didn't take the lowest bid. So I believe we could save billions of dollars in the city budget if we actually got rid of no bid contracting. So for example, with the asylum seeker crisis, the Hotel Association received 2 no bid contracts, both of which were in excess of $1 billion. By not bidding those out is what leads to prices rising. And so I plan on taking a very aggressive approach to the city budget to find those savings. That is what our city council role must be, so that we can help to enact universal childcare, something that we tried to do several years ago. And now I'm firmly committed to doing, and I know we can get this done if we have the will and the perseverance to really be aggressive with the city budget.
You've expressed some recent support for the idea of free buses. The MTA chair and CEO, Janel Lieber, is out there very clearly stating he's skeptical of that idea. He's worried about the revenue loss. He thinks there could be other ramifications of shifting to a fully free bus system. This is sort of a universality versus subsidized conversation, right? It's childcare, it's buses, it's a lot of other things. He says, let's target more affordability programs, increase fare fares, et cetera, but we don't need to make the bus free for people who can afford it and move that revenue off the table. On these issues generally, how do you think about it? And do you think there should be some conversations, and perhaps a reinvigoration of a pilot program on a free bus before?
Well, I will say and thank Corey Johnson for Fair Fares, because he really led on that. And I think it's an amazing program, and a program that we need to expand, and something that has been a lifeline for so many New Yorkers. I happen to have the distinction of having the bus line M15 in my district that has the highest ridership, not only in the city of New York, but in arguably across the nation. We do need to do something on this issue. The buses are really slow, and it's very aggravating for New Yorkers. And so I absolutely support getting buses that are faster. In terms of the free buses, of course, that would be wonderful if we can make the buses free. I look forward to having conversations with the mayor-elect on that. Ultimately, Albany is going to have to be, the key driver of that in terms of the budget. So I look forward to being a partner in that, going up to Albany and having those conversations. But really, I also look forward to talking to my colleagues, because at the end of the day, we are a member-driven run body. Yes, we have a speaker, but it's also in conversations with the colleagues. I do feel that there is a lot of support for this amongst the colleagues from the conversations I've had so far, and so look forward to continuing that.
The key to faster buses might not be free, though, right? One of the keys to faster buses is infrastructure.
Right.
And that's one area, not to keep referencing the former speaker, maybe this will be the last time, but
I'm glad you came, Corey.
he passed the streets master plan law,
Yes.
which requires more bus lanes, bike lanes, pedestrianization. Mayor Adams' administration is way behind on the bus lanes, but part of that is because of council members and opposition in their districts that pop up. How do you reconcile that? Will you be an advocate and again, an interventionist in some of those discussions to make sure that the bus infrastructure is there? Because it can be free, but if it's stuck behind double parked cars and all of that, it doesn't work.
Absolutely. We need to make sure that these buses are moving faster. They're a key and vital way for New Yorkers to move around the city. We always want to encourage the utilization of public transportation. So yes, there are certain districts where it has become an issue, and I look forward to working with various council members who do have concerns to try to get over those concerns so we can make sure that the buses are moving faster, because that inures to everyone's benefit.
And are you a fan of busways where it's
Yes.
drastically reduced car traffic?
I am, and the busways that we have so far in the city, people have been largely very, very supportive of.
Moving to another easy issue, Rikers Island.
Yes, okay.
Obviously, closure won't happen by 2027.
Correct.
Borough-based jail development is years behind the plan. It costs twice as much as originally budgeted and will only provide 2/3 as many beds as the people we now have under custody. So how should the Rikers closure and borough-based jail plan be changed? Specifically, what should be a timeline that's reasonable? And let's get real. What's the plan B if we have more people under custody than beds we're building? We have to get real on this.
But we do. We clearly are not going to meet the timeline, and that is very problematic. I absolutely support closing Rikers, and we need to close Rikers. The borough-based jails are unfortunately way behind construction, every single one of them. The varying timelines are 2029, 2030, 2031. It's really unacceptable that this happened. I mean, it's just truly shocking, the delay in terms of the overall construction plan for the borough-based jails. And so now we do have a problem, and that is one of the many items that I'm going to need to discuss with the mayor-elect, because at the end of the day, we can't meet the deadline. We will not meet the deadline to close Rikers. And so this is now going to have a conversation as to what are the options. And we're going to need to look at every option on the table. And so I'm not going to get ahead of my colleagues in the council in discussing what those options are. I've started those conversations. We will continue them, and then the council will have a plan in working very closely with Mayor-elect Mamdani.
And how do the number of beds being built factor into that?
Well, it's an issue. I mean, it's a real issue. We have a fundamental problem. The time and the fact that it has dragged on now for the last couple of years, knowing that we've had this problem, is pretty shocking.
The other issue, and we've seen the deaths, we've seen the monitor reports, we've seen the lack of safety for both staffs and people under custody. Part of the issue is a management problem. How do we manage 4 jails better because we have not managing one very well? Are we just moving this problem around the city? What's the council role in improving that?
Well, I don't think we're necessarily just creating the new problem. I mean, the issues with Rikers are systemic, and the deaths are completely and wholly unacceptable. And so having that federal monitor was mission critical. The whole point of the borough-based jails, I mean, is to provide supportive services, to provide wraparound services, to make sure that people are closer to their families. I mean, there are all of these policy reasons that support the borough-based jail plan. So I think I don't agree with the premise that then we're going to have the problems that we have with the Rikers. I fundamentally don't agree with that. I think having these smaller borough-based jails does address some of the problems that exist with Rikers.
Mayor-elect Mamdani clearly wants to do a lot more, speaking of that delta between the number of people in custody and the beds that will someday be available at the new jails. He wants to do a lot more around alternatives to incarceration. Not to necessarily get you to weigh in on that, but you've talked a lot about areas of alignment. Where do you see one potential big area of difference of opinion with the mayor-elect? Is it this creation of this Department of Community Safety, which the council would have to play a huge role in? And he's saying we'll have a $1.1 billion budget. Some of it moved from existing programs into that new department.
Sure.
Is it things like alternatives to incarceration? Is it things like stances on BDS in Israel and some of those issues? Where do you see an area of conflict with the mayor-elect?
Okay, so on the Department of Community Safety, I've begun conversations with Commissioner Tisch on that to understand that. And some may require legislation, some may not. There are many things that the mayor can do via executive order, many things. And so we started to look at that because some things can be done through executive order, which would expedite things, as opposed to going through the council's much lengthier legislative process. So I look forward to having those conversations and also speaking to my colleagues about that. So I think there is a lot of agreement, though, in terms of mental health issues, that we're asking NYPD officers to do too much, and that the mental health calls, I think there is a lot of support within the council to address that and to move some of those functions away. On Israel, on BDS, on Cornell Technion, look, Cornell Technion is in my district. It's on Roosevelt Island. I'm a big fan of Cornell Technion. Cornell Technion has created thousands and thousands of jobs. And just as importantly, it has incubated hundreds of startups. I go to Cornell Technion all the time to meet with these new startups. It's so exciting. They're then going to be locating in New York City. This is a wave of the future, creating biotech alleys, biotech corridors, startup companies. You know, we want to attract more jobs and businesses to our great city. So absolutely, I support Cornell Technion. And on BDS, I mean, again, I don't support BDS. And so that is an area, of course, of disagreement. I am someone, as a lawyer, who absolutely strongly supports the First Amendment right to peacefully protest. It is a hallmark, bedrock principle. But I believe in reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. So, for example, what happened at Park East Synagogue was not acceptable because congregants literally could not leave or get in to worship. We have to protect houses of worship so that people can worship freely. As the chair of Community Board 1 in Lower Manhattan, I was the chair that wrote the resolution standing up for the Islamic Cultural Center and Mosque. I backed that project. I had death threats for 1 year as a result of standing up for that project. I'm very proud that on January 7th, I would be the first Jewish speaker. And I'm very proud that we're going to have the first Muslim mayor. This is a historic time for the Muslim and Jewish communities to come together at this seminal moment.
We are getting close to the end of our time together, and I appreciate that answer. And I think one of the things that's been missing a lot in our politics recently is trying to figure out ways to express more unity in the city. And so a lot of us are looking forward to seeing how you and the mayor-elect approach those issues together. I know I asked the question about a source of conflict, but I also believe it's important to be working on unity, of course. We have a little lightning round to wrap up our questions for you, and then we might take one or two audience questions here. So these are very short answers.
I'll try.
First, if you forecast your relationship with the mayor-elect, is there a mayor-speaker combination that
Oh,
is a model? Is it Quinn Bloomberg? Is it a bit more?
Corey's laughing. This is a very dangerous question, Ben, because no matter what answer I give, my view of a mayor-speaker relationship is people don't want to see dysfunction in city government. They just don't. People want to see city government working for New Yorkers. I think in the last 4 years, there's been a lot of combativeness. So that has not inured to the benefit of our city. And so we want to work very closely with Mayor-elect Mamdani when we can on issues of commonality. And we outlined many of them: affordable housing, universal childcare. There'll be so many other areas of disagreement. But we're a separate, co-equal branch of government. We need to perform our oversight function over agencies. We want the agencies to function. By the way, our oversight, and I've thought a lot about this as a former commissioner, also is retroactive. We need to look at the last 4 years and what has happened in some of these agencies. So originally, our oversight is going to be looking back. How did some of these things happen? How have so many of the city agencies been hollowed out? Some agencies are down with 1/3 vacancies. My former agency that I worked at, the city law department, is one of them. That's unacceptable. How did this happen? And there are many issues that we need to have oversight over on what has happened on the last 4 years. I mentioned no bid contracts. We need to dig deep into that to understand what were all the no bid contracts that happened. How are we going to fix that? So oversight first is not prospective, because there's nothing prospective there's nothing there, that hasn't happened yet. It's first got to be retroactive, really looking at that.
All right, the real lightning round
Sounds
starts
like the
now.
lightning
All
is
right,
happening.
Sorry, that was a long
no, that's
answer.
that question begets a long answer. Okay, yes or no? There's bills in the council right now to loosen some Airbnb restrictions for smaller property owners. Do you favor loosening some of those Airbnb restrictions or no?
I don't favor that,
Okay.
and I'm not a co-sponsor of the bill. I just want to say why: because we need to build affordable housing, and I am concerned that that bill does interfere with our affordable housing agenda. So I am not a co-sponsor of that bill.
All right, we're getting shorter. Good. Okay. Yes or no, should New York City embrace driverless automated cars, taxis, et cetera?
Well, that's an interesting question. No, I just want to say something. When I served as commissioner of the Department of Consumer Affairs, we were approached first with this issue. People asked us about the issue. I would need to see the data before we could, support something like that. We haven't seen the data on it. We'd need to see
There's
it.
a pilot starting. Yeah.
I know, that's what I'm saying. We'd have to see data on that. I can't support something without the data. And so I think there is some healthy skepticism about this issue. We also don't want to do job displacement, to be clear. So that would be a real concern I would have. So I'd need to see something on that before commenting on it.
All right, I'm pretty sure I know your answer on this one. Yes or no, return year-round outdoor dining in street space?
Unequivocally, yes.
Perfect.
And I want to say, no, I'm sorry. I just want to say something about this. While I voted for the outdoor dining bill in the last iteration of the council, I raised concerns that it should have been year-round, because you should not be asking these small businesses to have to bear the exorbitant costs of the license fee and the revocable consent fee, and you're asking them to house and store these tables and chairs in the other 6 months that they can't do it. I also was very vocal. Why did we give outdoor dining to a transit agency? DOT has no experience doing outdoor dining. My former agency, DCWP, which had licensed a sidewalk cafe, did. So I always thought the whole outdoor dining program should have always gone to DCWP. I can assure you that the next iteration of the council, we are committed to fixing the flaws in the outdoor dining program and letting it flourish. Sorry for the
A mix of fans and skeptics maybe on the outdoor dining. Yes or no, pedestrianize the financial district?
So I'm a former resident of the financial district. We pedestrianized Broad Street We pedestrianized part of Exchange Place. So all the cobblestone that you see in front of the New York Stock Exchange was something that I pushed forward with chairs and tables and all of that. So I would look forward to working with my colleague, Councilmember Marte, on his vision for what he wants to see in the financial district.
Name one additional city commissioner that the council should have to confirm a nomination of.
Well, I think DOT. I mean, to me, DOT is so important. It's the streets we walk on. It's the use of our public space. It's everything. Okay. It's bike lanes. It's our streets. It's no one doesn't deal with DOT. And I think we need to have some say in that.
Should the council have to confirm the school's chancellor?
I'd like to, it would be great if we had a role in that, because again, we're representing the parents. And so I think, look, the U.S. Senate has advice and consent over all sorts of federal appointees. Most legislative bodies have advice and consent over appointees. So I believe in advice and consent, but I do want to say one thing as a lawyer. Advice and consent does not mean, well, I think I would have appointed someone else. It means you're judiciously looking at that person's record to determine if they are qualified or not to serve in that capacity. It does not mean, well, we would have chosen a different candidate. That is not what responsible advice and consent means. And it's really up to the Rules Committee to responsibly, and judiciously look at the person's record.
Yes or no, should New York City keep mayoral control of city schools?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Should any city council bill that gets a majority, 26 sponsors, automatically get a hearing?
No, I have concerns with that. And I think it would lead to members not signing on to bills. And it would make it very difficult to govern the council.
The city council has 34 committees plus subcommittees. Are there any that are unnecessary?
We're looking at all of that right now. We're looking at every committee and every subcommittee. We may add different committees. We may take away certain committees. We're looking at all of that and would be announcing that in mid-January.
The city council yesterday, the ethics committee decided not to punish Councilmember Vernikov for taking a gun to a college protest in 2023. Was that the correct decision, or do you have concerns?
Well, the ethics chair, Councilmember Sandra Ung, issued a very strong statement about that. So it's not that they didn't take any action. They did take an action. They issued a very strong statement that elected officials should not be bringing guns to any event.
Last two. Brad Lander just announced he's challenging Dan Goldman in the 10th Congressional District. Are you with Brad Lander or Dan Goldman in that
I'm
primary?
Not going to comment. I'm not commenting. Look, I'm focused on the city council. I'm focused on leading the body over the next 4 years and the challenges that our city is going to face.
Okay. And which city council speaker before you is your biggest role model for the position?
Besides, we're taking Corey out of this.
No. I feel very fortunate that I've had a very close working relationship with many former speakers, Corey Johnson being one of them. I worked closely with Speaker Melissa Mark Favorito because I was commissioner while she was speaker. When Chris Quinn was speaker, I was the 7-year community board chair and dealing with a lot of the issues around Lower Manhattan. Obviously worked with our current speaker, Adrienne Adams. So I always, those games are very dangerous. I have wonderful relationships with all of our speakers. And so I look forward to maintaining those relationships.
What's the most important quality that a speaker needs to have to run the council well?
You have to build consensus. You have to be able to do it. And I think part and parcel is the fact that our coalition and announcing that we had a supermajority of support at this stage, which no one else has been able to do, it is because we've been able to build consensus amongst a broad and diverse ideological spectrum.
The city only has $2 billion in its rainy day fund. Would you support a law that mandated deposits to that fund when revenues are very high?
We need to focus on the rainy day fund because obviously that is fiscally the right thing to do, because I have been around long enough to unfortunately have been extremely involved in September 11th. That's how I got my start in public service, chairing the community board. Obviously what happened with COVID We know enough to know the unexpected unfortunately always does happen, and the things that we think will never happen do happen. So the rainy day fund is very important. I'm committed to it, and I look forward to working with you and Citizens Budget Commission on ways that we can strengthen and improve that.
Thank you. And since I've asked so many lighthearted questions, we're 4.5 days from the lighting the first candles for Hanukkah and a twist on the standard question here. What is your latke topping preference? Are we a sour cream or are we a applesauce person?
Sour cream all the way.
What?
Wrap or
What?
are we done?
Sure. I thought he was going to rap, and I was very impressed with Ben's skills.
Just confirming with my partner here. Thank you so much for taking all of our questions, really.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Please join us again in the new year for our next programs. And thank you so much, Citizens Budget Commission, for this partnership. And I want to just give a very quick shout out to Rose White, Veronica Rose, our events team, our AV team, our maintenance team, all the people that make these events happen. Security, did I say security? Security. Thank you all.